Welcome to the whispered journey. Imagine yourself lying back, your head sinking gently into the pillow. The room is dim, the air still, and there's that quiet hum of nighttime around you, the faintest sound of the world resting. Now, picture a night sky above you, vast and endless, scattered with a million shimmering lights. Each star seems so far away, yet somehow, they feel close, almost as if they're leaning in, whispering something just for you. You can feel it, can't you? That sense that there's something just beyond the edge of understanding, a secret, hidden in the way the stars sparkle, a truth so delicate, it only appears when you're calm enough, quiet enough, to notice it. Tonight, we're going to listen for those secrets together, not in a rush, not with the need to capture every detail, but softly, slowly, with a sense of wonder. I'm going to tell you stories, but they're not just stories, they're fragments of the biggest questions we've ever asked about life, time, reality, and you. This journey isn't about solving anything. There will be no hard conclusions, no sudden endings. Instead, we'll wander, like travelers walking down a moonlit path, pausing now and then to look up at the sky, to pick up a small stone, to listen to the sound of the wind moving through the trees. The things I'll share with you tonight, they are strange. Some are scientific theories, carefully built over centuries. Others are philosophical questions, ancient as the first flicker of human thought. And some are simply curiosities, little facts that feel like keys that open tiny doors in the mind, doors that lead somewhere mysterious. But here's the beautiful thing, we won't open them with force, we won't push, we'll just hold them in our hands for a moment, feel their weight, notice their shape, and then let them go. Because you're not here to stay awake and wrestle with the meaning of the universe, you're here to drift, to let the sound of these ideas wash over you like gentle waves. You might follow each thought for a while, or you might simply let them fade into the background as you feel your breathing slow, your body loosen, your eyes grow heavier. If your mind wanders, that's okay. If you stop listening for a moment and find yourself floating in that soft, in-between place where dreams begin, that's exactly what's supposed to happen. The stories will still be here, flowing like a river, carrying you forward without you needing to do anything at all. Think of these ideas as whispers passed down through time. Whispers from philosophers who once stood under the same stars you see now. Whispers from scientists who stayed awake long into the night, watching the patterns of the sky, wondering how it all works. Whispers from poets who felt something they couldn't quite explain, and so they turned it into words. Words that somehow made it across centuries to reach you tonight. And here's something to remember. Curiosity isn't loud, it doesn't shout. It waits patiently, sitting in the quiet, until you lean close enough to hear it. That's what we're doing together, leaning into the quiet, listening for the questions that have been here all along. As you lie there, notice your breath, in and out, in and out. The rhythm is gentle, there's no need to change it. Just let your body do what it already knows how to do. With every exhale, imagine a little of the day's weight leaving you. Thoughts about tomorrow, worries about yesterday, they can wait outside this moment. You are here now, in this small circle of stillness, and within it, there's only the sound of my voice, and the vastness of the universe unfolding in soft, delicate shapes around you. In a way, these stories are like constellations. Alone, each star is beautiful, a point of light in the dark. But when you connect them, when you see the lines between them, they form something bigger, a pattern, a picture. That's what we'll do tonight. We'll drift from star to star, from one strange fact to another, and let the invisible lines between them reveal something we didn't know was there. You might wonder why anyone would want to think about big ideas at night, when the goal is to sleep. But the truth is, the mind loves stories. And when you give it something to gently follow, something without sharp edges or loud moments, it relaxes. It lets go of the tight grip it keeps on the day's problems. It stops trying to fix or solve, and just begins to float. The ideas you'll hear aren't here to start debates. They're here to feel like a long walk through a dream. And dreams have their own rules. They can hold contradictions without needing to resolve them. They can ask questions without rushing for answers. Think of this as a kind of dream you can enter while still awake, a dream made of whispered facts and possibilities. The path we'll take tonight might not be straight. We might loop around. We might find ourselves back where we started. That's okay. In dreams, circles are just as valuable as straight lines. And as you listen, Remember that you don't need to hold on to everything. If a thought slips away, let it. If you forget a detail the moment you hear it, that's part of the experience. In this space, forgetting is just another way of relaxing. So, as you breathe, as you feel your body resting deeper into the bed, as your mind grows softer at the edges, know that you are exactly where you're supposed to be, here, listening, drifting. We will begin with the kinds of questions that have followed humans for thousands of years. Questions that seem simple when you first hear them, but open up like flowers the longer you think about them. Questions that reach into the heart of what it means to be alive. And the first question is one of the oldest, perhaps because it's one of the hardest, a question that has been asked in quiet temples, in busy marketplaces, in deep forests, and in the quiet of a lone traveler staring into a campfire. It is this: do we truly have free will? Let's take a slow breath together, in and out. Feel the air enter, feel it leave. In this quiet space, let's step into one of the most hauntingly beautiful questions we've ever asked ourselves. If everything in the universe is governed by cause and effect, if every moment is shaped by the moment before it, are we truly the ones steering our lives? It's a question that sits quietly in the background of human thought. We feel as though we choose, we decide what to say, where to go, who to love, what to avoid. It feels like we are the captains of our ships, plotting our courses through the sea of life. And yet, there's a whisper that follows. What if the course was set before we even touched the wheel? Philosophers have wrestled with this paradox. For thousands of years, Aristotle pondered the nature of human action, wondering whether some things were within our control, while others were destined to unfold no matter what we did. Centuries later, thinkers like Spinoza and Schopenhauer pushed the question further, suggesting that our sense of choice might be an illusion created by the mind to make life feel navigable. And in the last few decades, science has joined the conversation, not with quiet speculation, but with experiments. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet conducted a study that startled many. He asked people to make a simple, spontaneous decision, to move their wrist whenever they felt like it. While they did this, their brain activity was measured with delicate precision. Here's the strange part. The brain showed signs of preparing for the movement before the person reported deciding to do it, sometimes hundreds of milliseconds before they felt the conscious impulse to act. It was as though the decision had already been made, somewhere deeper, before the you that speaks and thinks had even noticed. If that's true, what does it mean for free will? Imagine a puppet on a stage. The puppet lifts its arm and feels proud for doing so. But what if, in reality, invisible strings had already pulled it up? And what if the puppet's sense of pride was simply a story it told itself after the fact? This idea that perhaps we are narrators of our lives more than true authors is unsettling, because if our choices are shaped entirely by prior causes, stretching back long before we were born, then perhaps we are less like captains of ships, and more like passengers on a vast river, drifting along its currents. But here's where the paradox becomes soft and beautiful instead of harsh and frightening. Even if our actions are shaped by infinite causes, we still feel like we are choosing. We still experience the moment of decision as something alive, something personal. Maybe free will is not about changing the grand flow of the river, but about how we move within it. We might not control the river's destination, but we can choose how we sit in the boat, upright, curious, noticing the light on the water, or hunched, eyes closed, waiting for it to be over. There is also the possibility that both things are true, that the chain of cause and effect shapes the world, and that within this chain, there is still a mysterious opening where our will flickers into being, small but undeniable, like a candle flame in a vast dark hall. The implications of all this are enormous. If free will is an illusion, then what does that mean for responsibility? If someone does something good, or something terrible, were they ever truly in control? Are we right to praise, or to blame? And if the future is as fixed as the past, then perhaps destiny is not just a poetic idea, but an inescapable reality. But maybe, just maybe, the value isn't in having total control, but in experiencing life as though we do, in feeling the weight of choice and savoring the richness it gives to our days. There's a gentleness in accepting that some things are beyond our command, like the weather, like the pull of the tides, like the turning of the earth, and maybe our choices are simply part of that same great pattern, intricate, connected, and deeply human. As you let your mind drift over these thoughts, Notice the stillness in your body, the way your hands rest, the softness in your breathing. You don't need to decide what this all means right now. You don't need to reach a conclusion. Just let the thought float, like a leaf on calm water. The paradox of free will is not something to be solved tonight. It is something to be felt, a reminder of the mysterious way reality wraps around us, of how much is seen, and how much is hidden. And speaking of things hidden, imagine for a moment that life itself is a kind of script, one that you're reading line by line, page by page. You can't skip ahead. You can't go back. But what if, and here is the next question, we'll drift toward, what if the entire universe is reading from a script of its own? Let your eyes grow heavy for a moment. Feel the weight of your body against whatever you're lying on. Notice the way the air moves in and out of your lungs. Slow, steady, quiet. And as you breathe, imagine that everything around you, the walls, the air, even the sound of my voice, might not be what it seems. What if all of this is just code? It's a strange thought, but it's not just the stuff of science fiction films. It's a serious philosophical idea proposed by Oxford philosopher Nick Bostrom in the early 2000s, and it begins with a simple observation. Technology keeps getting better. We've gone from primitive video games made of blinking pixels to vast, immersive worlds so detailed you can lose yourself in them for hours. Now imagine a future civilization, hundreds, maybe thousands of years ahead of us, with computers so powerful they could simulate entire worlds, not just images, but physics, chemistry, biology, even consciousness. These worlds would be so rich, so complete, that the beings inside would have no reason to suspect they weren't living in base reality. The simulation hypothesis says this: if such technology is possible, and if civilizations survive long enough to develop it, then the number of simulated worlds could far outnumber the single real one. And if that's the case, statistically speaking, there's a much higher chance that you and I are in a simulation than not. It sounds absurd, even a little unsettling, but think about it. Right now, you're hearing my words. You feel the surface beneath you. You have memories of your past, hopes for your future. All of these feel real because your mind interprets them that way. But if you were a simulated being, the code that runs your mind could simply tell you those memories are real. It could feed you the sensation of touch, the illusion of taste, the warmth of sunlight, all without any of it existing in the physical sense we think it does. Every star in the sky, every ripple in the ocean, every tear you've cried, could be a set of instructions running on some unimaginably vast processor. This idea isn't new in spirit. Ancient philosophers in both the East and West wondered whether the world was an illusion. In Hindu philosophy, there's the concept of Maya, the idea that reality is a kind of cosmic dream. In the West, Descartes once imagined an evil demon capable of deceiving us about everything we see and feel. The simulation hypothesis simply gives these ancient questions a technological twist. There are some strange hints that fuel the theory. In physics, we've discovered that reality seems to have a smallest unit of information, like pixels in a digital image. The universe also obeys mathematical laws with eerie precision, as if it were running on a set of perfectly written rules. And some researchers even speculate that we might someday detect glitches, tiny inconsistencies in the cosmic code. But here's the thing: if we really were in a simulation, would it change how you feel about your life? On one hand, it could make existence feel small, almost fragile, as though we are just characters in someone else's experiment. On the other, it might mean that life is even more precious, because it was created. Every sunrise, every laugh, every quiet moment before sleep might be the work of some artist or engineer who wanted us to feel joy, wonder, and love. If you are simulated, you are still you. You still feel what you feel. Pain is still pain. Beauty is still beauty. Your experiences are still real to you, even if their source is artificial. And there's another layer to consider. If we are in a simulation, perhaps the beings running it are watching, not in a sinister way, but with curiosity, like a writer watching characters in a story take on lives of their own. Maybe they don't interfere often, because the joy of watching is seeing where the story goes. Then again, maybe they do interfere sometimes. Maybe those impossible moments of luck, the coincidences that feel too perfect, the strange sense that the universe is nudging you towards something, are tiny edits to the code. If that's true, then free will the paradox we just explored takes on a new twist. Maybe we do make choices, but only within the parameters of the simulation. Like a player in a vast open-world game, you can go where you like, do what you wish. But the mountains, the rivers, the stars above those are built into the program. There's a strange comfort in that, because if reality is code, then the patterns we see in life, the way history seems to rhyme, the way certain truths feel eternal make sense. They're part of the architecture. And here's where it gets even stranger. If we are in a simulation, who's to say that the beings running it aren't in one themselves? Maybe simulations stack infinitely, each one nested inside another, like Russian dolls. And somewhere, far above all the layers, is the original reality, the place where it all began. Or maybe there is no original. Maybe reality is forever made of simulations within simulations, with no true starting point. As these thoughts drift in your mind, notice the softness in your body. You don't have to decide whether any of this is true. The value tonight is not in finding answers, but in letting the questions open gentle spaces in your imagination. And perhaps that's exactly the point. If we are in a simulation, maybe the purpose isn't to figure it out. Maybe it's simply to live within it fully, to feel the rain, even if it's made of code, to taste the fruit, even if it's data, to love, even if love itself is just lines in a program. And yet, if the universe is a simulation, there's one more question that naturally follows. If it was built, then it was built for a reason, by someone or something. And if that's true, why is it so eerily quiet out there? Where are the others? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine floating in the darkness of space. There is no ground beneath you, no ceiling above, just an endless, silent ocean of black, sprinkled with stars. Some of them close enough to imagine touching, others so far away their light has been traveling toward us since before human beings even existed. Now, take a deep breath and let this thought drift into your mind. If there are billions of stars in our galaxy, and if many of them have planets, and if even a small fraction of those planets are like Earth, then where is everybody? This is the question that Italian physicist Enrico Fermi asked one afternoon in 1950 during a casual lunch with colleagues. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't even part of a formal lecture. Just a simple, almost childlike question. Where is everybody? That question became what we now call the Fermi paradox, the mystery of why. Despite the unimaginable size of the universe and the high probability of life elsewhere, we've never found any clear sign of it. We've pointed radio telescopes at the sky, listening for even the faintest whisper of alien communication. We've scanned distant planets for signs of water, oxygen, and chemical fingerprints that might hint at life, and yet, nothing. No messages, no signals, no ships drifting across the void toward us. It's almost as if the universe is empty. And yet the math says otherwise. Astronomers estimate there are about 200 billion stars in our galaxy alone. Many of those stars have planets, and some of those planets are in the habitable zone, where liquid water could exist. If life arises naturally, as it did here on Earth, then statistically, the galaxy should be teeming with living worlds, and given enough time, some of those worlds should produce intelligent beings, beings capable of communication, even interstellar travel. But here we are, waiting. Some scientists believe there could be a simple answer. Maybe intelligent life is incredibly rare, even rarer than we imagine. Perhaps the conditions that allowed us to exist are so precise, so fragile, that it almost never happens. We may be an anomaly. Others think civilizations might rise and fall before they have a chance to reach out. Technology is powerful, but it's also dangerous. A civilization might destroy itself through war, environmental collapse, or something we can't even imagine, long before it becomes capable of crossing the stars. Then there's a darker possibility, one that keeps some thinkers up at night. What if there is something out there, something that prevents civilizations from revealing themselves? A kind of universal great filter that stops life from advancing too far. Maybe it's a natural barrier, like a technological limit that can't be overcome. Or maybe it's something intentional. Imagine an ancient species, older and wiser than any we could picture, quietly monitoring the galaxy. They see a young civilization like ours developing, experimenting, reaching for the stars. And just before it gets too far, they intervene, silently, decisively, perhaps in ways we wouldn't even recognize until it was too late. It sounds like the plot of a science fiction story. And yet, if it were true, it might explain the silence. There's another possibility, and it's strangely comforting. Maybe they're out there, and they already know we're here, but they've chosen not to contact us. This is called the zoo hypothesis, the idea that Earth is like an animal enclosure, carefully observed but never disturbed, to let our civilization grow naturally without interference. If that's the case, then somewhere, out there in the cold, dark, someone might be watching you, right now. Not in a threatening way. More like a parent watching a child sleep, curious, protective, and patient. And perhaps one day, when we're ready, they will speak to us. Or maybe they already have, but in ways we didn't understand. There's also the idea that advanced civilizations might not use technology we can detect. Maybe they communicate using methods far beyond radio waves, forms of energy or dimensions we don't yet comprehend. To them, our search might be like listening for drums in a world that speaks in light. Then there's the truly haunting thought, maybe we are alone. Maybe there's no one else to find. Think about what that means. All those stars, all those worlds, and not a single other mind to look up and wonder. If that's true, then every story ever told, every piece of music, every love, every loss, is unique to Earth, and we are the only ones in the entire galaxy who will ever know them. It would make us rare, precious, fragile, and maybe it would make our responsibility even greater. If life is this rare, we cannot afford to destroy it. We must protect it, cherish it. But maybe we've been looking at it the wrong way. What if the silence is not emptiness, but patience? What if the galaxy is full of voices, but they speak so slowly that a single sentence takes thousands of years? In that case, we've only been listening for a cosmic blink of an eye. Perhaps, in time, we will hear the faint echo of another mind, calling across the dark. And when we do, the Fermi paradox will no longer be a paradox at all, but a reminder of how vast, mysterious, and patient the universe truly is. Let your mind rest on that image of a vast, sleeping galaxy, holding its breath in the darkness. And now, as you drift deeper into thought, imagine that loneliness, that vast silence, and carry it with you into another kind of mystery, not about life, but about the very fabric of existence itself, a concept in physics that is equally haunting and equally strange. Picture yourself drifting through space, far, far away from any planet, star, or galaxy. There is no light here, not because your eyes are closed, but because there is nothing left to shine. No warmth on your skin, no glimmer on the horizon, just an infinite blackness, a silence so deep that it feels as if time itself has stopped breathing. Now imagine this isn't just some lonely corner of the cosmos. Imagine this is everywhere, every galaxy, every star, every place that once held life, warmth, and motion. This is the vision painted by one of the most sobering ideas in cosmology, the heat death of the universe. It's not an explosion, not a violent collapse, not a fiery end. It's quieter than that, slower, almost imperceptible, like the gentle fading of a candle's flame after a long night. The story begins with the concept of entropy, the natural tendency for things to move from order to disorder. Imagine a hot cup of tea in a cold room. At first, the tea is steaming, full of heat. But over time, that heat spreads into the room. The tea cools. Eventually, the tea and the room reach the same temperature. The energy is still there, but it's evenly spread out, no longer able to do anything useful. The heat death of the universe is that same principle, on the grandest possible scale. Right now, the universe is full of movement. Stars are burning hydrogen into helium, releasing energy that lights up their planets. Galaxies spin, planets orbit, black holes devour matter and spit out radiation. There is drama everywhere, but entropy is always at work, spreading energy out, equalizing differences, erasing the potential for anything new to happen. Stars burn their fuel and eventually die. Some collapse into dense white dwarfs or neutron stars. Others explode in brilliant supernova, scattering their elements into space, the building blocks of new stars, planets, and even life. Yet even this cosmic recycling cannot go on forever. Each new generation of stars is born from the ashes of the last, but the supply of fuel is not infinite. There will come a time, trillions upon trillions of years from now, when the last star burns its final atom of hydrogen. No more warmth, no more light. The universe will enter a long twilight. Dead stars, cold and dark, will drift through the void. Galaxies will thin out as stars are pulled away or destroyed. Black holes will remain for an unimaginably long time, slowly evaporating through a process called Hawking radiation, until they too vanish. And then, all that will be left is a thin, almost featureless fog of particles, evenly spread across an unimaginably vast expanse. No heat differences, no movement, no change. The universe will have reached maximum entropy, a state of perfect balance and perfect stillness. Some scientists call this the end of time, not because clocks will stop, but because nothing will happen anymore. Every process, every motion, every fluctuation that once made time feel alive will have faded into silence. It is a vision that feels deeply sad, and yet strangely peaceful, like the end of a story where every conflict has been resolved, every thread tied up, every character laid to rest. When you think about it, the heat death is not a violent ending, it is a gentle one. No sudden destruction, no catastrophic collapse, just a fading away. Of course, this is not happening anytime soon. Not in millions of years, or billions, or even trillions. The timescales involved are so vast that they almost lose their meaning. If the entire history of the universe so far were just 1 second, then the heat death might still be hours, days, or even years away. It exists in a realm of time so distant, we cannot truly grasp it. And yet, the thought of it lingers, because it reminds us that even the grandest things we know, galaxies, stars, even the universe itself, are temporary. Everything changes, everything fades, but here's the strange comfort in that idea. Endings are part of the natural rhythm of existence. If the universe began in a burst of unimaginable energy, the Big Bang, then it is only fitting that it ends in quiet stillness. And perhaps, endings are not the whole story. There are theories suggesting that what we see as heat death might be just one phase, the closing of a chapter before something entirely new begins. Maybe the universe will cycle, reborn in another Big Bang. Or perhaps the heat death is simply the pause before a transformation we can't yet imagine, like the silence before the first note of a new symphony. For now, we can only wonder, and maybe that's enough, to know that we live in the vibrant, active middle of the story, when stars still shine, when planets still turn, when life is still possible. Take a moment to let that sink in, the realization that we exist in a time when the cosmos is still young, still filled with light and motion. This is the universe's springtime, and we are here to witness it. So breathe deeply, and let the image of that distant, quiet future drift to the edges of your mind, like a dream you can almost remember but not quite touch. Because while the heat death may be inevitable in the far future, here and now, there is still so much to see, so much to feel, so much to understand. And speaking of time, what if our understanding of it is entirely wrong? What if time isn't a straight line at all, but something far stranger, something that could turn the very idea of beginnings and endings inside out? Close your eyes and picture an old, ticking clock. Its hands sweep slowly over a white face, the steady tick-tock marking every second. You've seen clocks like this your whole life, and somewhere deep inside, you've assumed this is how time works: equal steps, even beats, marching forward at the same pace for everyone, everywhere. But what if I told you that clock is lying? Not lying on purpose, of course, just giving you a local version of reality. Because time is not the same for everyone. It never has been. This idea that time is not universal is one of the most profound and unsettling gifts from the mind of Albert Einstein. More than a century ago, Einstein revealed something the world had never seriously considered before. Time is woven into space itself. It is not an invisible ruler, ticking away in the background. It is part of the very fabric of reality, and like any fabric, it can be stretched or squeezed. This is the essence of his theory of relativity. And once you truly understand it, the steady tick-tock of that familiar clock begins to sound strange. Let's start small. Imagine you were standing still on Earth, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere high above, a spacecraft orbits, gliding silently through the darkness. Inside that spacecraft, there's another clock, one that looks identical to yours. But if you could compare the two after a long journey, you would find something extraordinary. The clock on the spacecraft has ticked more slowly than yours. The astronauts inside, they are ever so slightly younger than they would have been if they had stayed on Earth. This is not science fiction. It's been measured. Time runs differently depending on where you are and how fast you're moving. Astronauts on the International Space Station age a fraction of a second slower than the rest of us. It's not enough to notice in daily life, but it's real, and it accumulates. Why does this happen? Einstein's insight was that space and time are not separate. They form a single, unified thing called space-time. And space-time is shaped by matter and energy. A massive object, like Earth or the Sun, creates a dent in the fabric of space-time, and that dent changes the way time flows. If you've ever pressed your hand into a soft mattress, you know the way. The surface dips under your weight. In a similar way, a planet bends space-time, and in that bent space-time, time itself runs slower. This means that if you could stand at the edge of a black hole, one of the most massive and dense objects in the universe, time would slow dramatically for you compared to someone far away. A single hour near the black hole might equal years out in the wider universe. This bending of time also happens when you travel at extreme speeds. The faster you move, the more time slows for you compared to someone at rest. At everyday speeds, the effect is microscopic, but as you approach the speed of light, time slows to a crawl. For a beam of light itself, time doesn't pass at all. It's a concept that bends the mind, and it has strange consequences. Imagine twins born at the same moment. One stays on Earth, the other boards a spaceship that travels near the speed of light, explores the stars, and returns decades later. The spacefaring twin might have aged only a few years, while the one who stayed on Earth has grown old. This is known as the twin paradox, and though it sounds like a riddle, it is an inevitable outcome of relativity. What's even more extraordinary is how these effects have been proven, not just by theory, but by experiment. Atomic clocks have been flown on airplanes, placed on satellites, and compared with clocks on Earth. Each time the results match Einstein's predictions. And so, the comfortable, familiar notion of time steady, constant, absolute crumbles away. Instead, we are left with something far stranger. Time is personal. It is different for you, for me, for a star on the other side of the galaxy. Every clock is telling a local truth, shaped by motion and gravity. There is no single, universal now that applies to all of us at once. This leads to a haunting thought. If time flows differently depending on where you are, then the sequence of events in the universe is not the same for everyone. The past, present, and future are not fixed points on a shared map. They are tangled threads, woven uniquely for each observer. Pause for a moment, and let that sink in. Right now, somewhere far away, there could be places where now is not the same as your now. Perhaps, from the perspective of a distant star, your future has already happened, or your past is still unfolding. And here's where the mystery deepens. If time can be bent and stretched, could it also be looped? Could the fabric of space-time curl back on itself, allowing you to step not just into the future, but into the past? Physicists have toyed with the idea, and while there are no easy paths to time travel, the laws of relativity don't explicitly forbid certain kinds of loops in space-time. The real obstacles may be practical, not theoretical. But for now, perhaps, the most poetic lesson relativity offers us is this: every moment is fleeting and unique. Not because time is slipping away in some universal countdown, but because each of us is moving along our own private river of time. Some rivers run fast, some flow more slowly, but none of them can ever truly meet in the exact same moment again. And so, when we speak of now, we are really speaking of a moment that belongs only to us. Imagine that for a second. Your now is unlike anyone else's. Even as we share this story, even as you hear these words, your time is your own, shaped by your motion, your position, your gravity, and somewhere out there, in the quiet reaches of space, someone else's now is unfolding in its own way. If time can bend, if it can stretch and fold, then maybe, just maybe, it can close into a circle. And if that were true, what would that mean for beginnings and endings, for cause and effect, for destiny itself? Picture this: you are lying in your bed, the soft hum of the world around you almost fading into silence. Your breathing is slow, your eyes are closed. You feel that pleasant weight of being still, and then, in that quiet, a voice, inside your mind, whispers a question. What if this life you are living right now, every heartbeat, every word you've spoken, every smile you've given, Every tear you've shed is not happening for the first time. What if it has? All happened before, and will happen again, and again, and again, forever. This is the unsettling, intoxicating thought experiment of Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who called it the eternal recurrence. Nietzsche didn't mean it necessarily as a literal scientific claim, though some have tried to imagine physical models that might allow it. Instead, he offered it as a test, a mirror, a challenge. He asked us to picture a universe where time is not a straight line from birth to death, but a wheel, spinning endlessly, a wheel that carries your life, in perfect repetition, no skipped chapters, no alternate endings, no new choices. Every embrace, you embrace again. Every mistake, you make again. Every victory, every loss, every laugh, every heartbreak, all of it returns to you exactly as before. You do not remember the last cycle. You do not foresee the next. But each moment is an echo of itself, endlessly rippling across eternity. Now, imagine that, for real. Would you be comforted? Would you feel a deep, calm acceptance, knowing that nothing is truly lost, that every joy you felt will come again, that sunsets you loved will paint the sky once more, and people you miss will once again walk beside you? Or would you feel trapped? Would the beauty of life turn bitter if you knew it was not unique, but endlessly recycled? Would mistakes you regret weigh even heavier, knowing they are yours for all time? Nietzsche's question was never about whether the eternal recurrence is physically true. It was about what it would reveal about you. If the thought fills you with despair, what does that say about how you are living now? If the thought fills you with peace, then perhaps you are living in a way that you would gladly repeat forever. He framed it as a kind of moral compass, not a compass pointing north, but a compass pointing inward. If you knew this moment was eternal, if you knew you would live it again infinitely, would you choose to live it exactly the same way you are right now? It's a haunting filter to pass your choices through, and it works quietly in the mind. Even as you listen to these whispers, think of your day today. Imagine, for a moment, that every detail of it, the way you spoke to people, the way you treated yourself, the way you spent your hours, is not a temporary thing that will be gone tomorrow, but a scene carved into the eternal loop of your life. Does that thought make you want to change something, or hold on to it exactly as it is? There is another layer to this idea, one that brushes against physics and cosmology. Some scientists have considered the possibility of a cyclical universe, one that expands in a great burst, slows, collapses, and then begins again. An eternal breathing in and out of reality. If that were true, perhaps not only our lives, but the entire history of the cosmos, the rise of stars, the formation of planets, the birth and death of civilizations, would be replayed endlessly, like a film on an infinite reel. And if matter and energy follow the same patterns each time, perhaps each new universe is exactly like the last. Perhaps you are exactly like the last you. The science of such cycles is uncertain, but the poetry of it is undeniable. In a strange way, the eternal recurrence offers both comfort and challenge. It tells you, you have already lived this moment, and you will live it again. And then it asks, so, will you live it well? Nietzsche, in his own way, presented this as the ultimate affirmation of life. To be able to say yes to the eternal recurrence, to accept every joy and every pain, knowing they are inseparable, is to embrace life in its rawest, truest form. It is not a selective acceptance. You cannot keep only the good moments and throw away the bad. The eternal recurrence, you must take it all, the warmth of love and the sting of loss, the glow of success and the shadow of failure. In this way, the eternal recurrence is not so different from life as it actually is. We cannot change the past. We cannot escape the present. We can only decide how fully we will live it. Take a moment and feel the weight of this idea, not as a burden, but as a presence, the kind of presence that makes every second vivid, the kind that makes you notice the way the air feels against your skin, the way your own breathing sounds in your ears, the way the darkness behind your closed eyelids is never quite fully black. Every sensory detail is part of your loop, every thought, every heartbeat. And in this quiet, perhaps you realize something profound. If life were to repeat endlessly, maybe it would not be a curse. If you loved it enough, now, picture the wheel of time again, turning, your life as it is, now, set into its grooves. If you could reach out and touch the rim of that wheel, Would you try to stop it, or would you let it spin? If you would let it spin, maybe you've already answered Nietzsche's challenge. And so, from the vast cycles of eternity, we turn our gaze inward to something smaller, yet no less mysterious. We leave the great spinning wheel and descend into the tiniest cogs that make it turn, the smallest building blocks of existence. Imagine you've been drifting through the vast, slow revolutions of the universe, spinning on that eternal wheel we spoke of. Now, let's take a deep breath and shrink, smaller, smaller still, until the stars and planets vanish, until even atoms themselves become enormous in comparison to you. We are now at a place so small, so delicate, that the rules of reality begin to change. Here, at the quantum scale, the familiar logic of the everyday world begins to melt away. In the ordinary world, we expect things to be one way or the other. A door is either open or closed. The sun is either above the horizon or below it. A coin lands either heads or tails. But in the quantum world, a particle the smallest speck of matter can be both open and closed, both here and there, both yes and no. That is quantum superposition, the idea that, until we look, a particle exists in all of its possible states at the same time. You may have heard of Schrödinger's cat, the thought experiment where a cat in a box is both alive and dead, until you open the box to check. It's a strange, almost absurd example, but it captures the essence of quantum superposition. Reality, at its smallest, does not commit until it must. When a particle is unobserved, it is described not as being in one definite state, but as a wave of probabilities, a shimmering cloud of possibilities, each equally real. But the moment you observe it, the cloud collapses, the particle chooses. It becomes one thing. Observation seems to sculpt reality out of the raw clay of potential. This idea is unsettling. If things exist in many states at once until we look, then our role as observers is not passive. We are not merely watching reality happen. We may, in some mysterious way, be participating in creating it. It is as if the universe waits for our gaze before deciding what it will be. And so, physicists have wrestled with the implications. Does observation require a conscious mind, or will any interaction with the environment, a passing photon, a scattering atom, cause the collapse of superposition into one definite outcome? In the quantum world, the line between possibility and actuality is fragile. Consider a single electron spinning both clockwise and counterclockwise until you measure it, or a photon traveling every possible path through space until your experiment forces it to choose one dot. It is as if reality is hesitant, as if it holds all of its cards close, until the moment it must lay one down. The strangeness of superposition has been tested and confirmed again and again in laboratories. Experiments like the famous double-slit experiment show particles behaving as waves of possibility, spreading out, interfering with themselves, and yet, when measured, appearing as tiny points, as if they had been in just one place all along. This raises a haunting thought. Maybe what we call reality is, at its core, nothing like the solid, predictable thing we imagine. Maybe it is a vast ocean of potential, only crystallizing into the familiar world when we touch it with our awareness. In a sense, you could imagine every moment of your life in a kind of superposition, countless possibilities hanging in the air, waiting for the moment you act. And in acting, you collapse the wave into one lived reality. And here, something strange happens to our sense of self. If the smallest building blocks of reality work this way, are we, too, in some form, made of possibilities? Are we the sum of infinite potential versions of ourselves, existing quietly until choice, or chance, or attention selects one? The thought is both humbling and liberating. Humbling because it reminds us that the universe is not under our full control. Liberating because perhaps, in some unfathomable way, we are more than the single thread of existence we see. Imagine again that tiny particle, suspended in its shimmering cloud of possibilities. No rush, no need to decide, simply existing in every potential it could be. Now, imagine your own life like that. Not fixed, not locked, but a cloud of paths, each awaiting the moment you truly look and truly choose. And in that pause before the choice, there is something beautiful. Quantum superposition invites us to see reality not as a static thing, but as a living mystery. It whispers that what we see is only one branch of a vast tree of possibilities, and that somewhere, in a realm beyond our perception, all other branches are still there, still real in their own quiet way. Physicists still argue about what this means. Is superposition a sign that the universe splits into many versions at every decision point, the so-called many worlds interpretation? Or is it that reality itself is not determined until interaction collapses the wave? Both possibilities bend the mind. In one, there are countless universes, each holding a slightly different version of you. In another, there is just this one reality, but it is shaped and sculpted by the delicate dance of observation and possibility. Either way, at the heart of it all is a truth we cannot escape. Reality is not as solid as it feels beneath our hands. It is delicate, shifting, alive in ways we are only beginning to understand, and perhaps, knowing this changes the way you look at everything. That chair you're sitting on is a collection of particles, each with its own strange quantum dance. The light in your room is made of photons that could have been anywhere before striking your eyes, and even the neurons firing in your brain right now follow the same rules, carrying thoughts that may themselves be shaped by quantum events. So when we say that superposition might be the code of our consciousness, maybe it's not just poetry. Maybe, deep within the smallest flickers of matter and energy, lies the same mystery that gives rise to awareness, to thought, to the feeling of being alive. As you listen to this, let yourself drift into that thought. You are both the observer and the observed, the wave and the particle, the possibility and the choice. Somewhere, in the quiet, you exist in countless forms, but here, in this moment, you are this one. And as we follow that shimmering thread from the smallest particles upward, we find ourselves wondering if superposition holds the seeds of consciousness. What is consciousness itself? Close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep just yet, but to notice. Notice that behind every sound you hear, behind every thought that drifts through your mind, there is something quietly aware. That awareness is you, or at least, it feels like you. We move through life inside this stream of experience, always looking outward at the world, the shapes, the colors, the voices, the laughter, the pain. But if you turn inward, there is a strange and unshakable question waiting for you. Where does this awareness come from? Science can tell us much about the brain. We can scan it, measure the electrical pulses, map the firing patterns of billions of neurons. We can point to the visual cortex when you see, to the auditory cortex when you hear, to the hippocampus when you remember. But none of that explains the feeling. This is what philosopher David Chalmers famously called the hard problem of consciousness. The easy problems, if we can call them that, are about mechanics. How does the brain process information? How do we speak, move, decide? But the hard problem is why any of that should be accompanied by an inner life at all. Why should a certain arrangement of atoms in the brain give rise to the taste of chocolate, the pain of heartbreak, the warmth of a summer afternoon on your skin? Why should matter wake up? For all our scientific progress, this remains a mystery, perhaps the deepest one we know. Some thinkers suggest that consciousness is not something the brain produces, but something it channels, like a radio receiving a broadcast. Perhaps the brain tunes into a field of awareness that already exists. Others go further, suggesting that consciousness might be a fundamental property of the universe, like space, time, or gravity. That it is not an emergent feature of complex matter, but something woven into the fabric of reality itself. This idea, called panpsychism, imagines that even the tiniest particles possess some primitive form of experience, not thoughts or emotions, as we know them, but the faintest glimmer of what it is like to exist. If that's true, then you and I are not isolated islands of awareness in a dead universe. We are expressions of a universal ocean of consciousness, rising and falling like waves, each for a time believing itself separate, before merging back into the whole. And that changes everything. It means consciousness is not a fragile spark that will vanish when the body dies. It means that awareness in some form may be as eternal as the stars. But then another question rises. If consciousness is everywhere, why does your consciousness feel like yours? Why is there this particular view of the world from behind your eyes? This personal thread of memories, choices, and dreams. We could call it identity, or the self, but even that is slippery. Meditation traditions from the East, neuroscience in the West, both hint that the self might be an illusion, that what we call I is just a collection of thoughts, sensations, and memories passing through awareness, like clouds drifting across the sky. The sky is the awareness itself. The clouds are the passing contents of mind. If we could truly see this, we might realize that we are not the thoughts, not the feelings, not the body, but the silent space in which all of those arise, and maybe, just maybe, that silent space is the same in all of us. This is not just a philosophical curiosity, it has real implications for how we live. If consciousness is fundamental and shared, then harming another is, in some deep way, harming ourselves. If the boundary between you and me is only a trick of perception, then compassion becomes as natural as breathing. It also changes how we face the unknown. The fear of death, for example, often rests on the assumption that consciousness is fragile, that it depends entirely on a functioning brain. But if awareness is woven into the universe, then what we truly are may be less like a candle flame that goes out, and more like light that changes form, passing from one expression to another, never truly destroyed. And yet, despite these beautiful possibilities, the mystery remains. We still don't know why the universe is aware of itself at all. We don't know why there is something, rather than nothing. Perhaps that is the point. Perhaps consciousness is one of those things that can be lived, but never fully explained. Like a song that can be heard, but not captured in words. Like a dream that dissolves the moment you try to hold it. And so, here we are, you, listening, me, speaking. 2 points of awareness, meeting in a shared space of sound and meaning. And yet, at the deepest level, perhaps not two at all. Take a moment to simply be aware. Of being aware, no past, no future. Just this stillness, like the pause between two breaths. In that stillness, the mystery feels less like a puzzle to be solved, and more like a friend to be known. Somewhere deep inside, you might feel the truth, that you are not inside the universe. The universe is inside you. Every star, every galaxy, every distant whisper of time, all appearing within the boundless field of your awareness. And if that's true, then perhaps life has no true end. Imagine, for a moment, you're standing in a vast, empty space. There are no stars, no planets, no light, no sound, just nothing. And yet, in that emptiness, there is you, a conscious point of awareness, floating in silence. Now, here's the question. If there's no one to see the stars, do they exist? It's a thought experiment as old as philosophy itself. The tree falling in the forest with no one to hear it. Does it make a sound? For most of history, we've assumed the universe is the primary thing, that it existed first, cold and indifferent, and life is just a rare accident, a byproduct of blind forces swirling through space. But there is another possibility, one that turns this idea inside out. Dr. Robert Lanza calls it Biocentrism, and it begins with a simple but radical idea. Life doesn't arise from the universe arises from life. According to Biocentrism, consciousness is not a latecomer in the cosmic story. It is the main character. The stage, the script, the lights, all exist only because consciousness perceives them. This means that the moon above us, the ocean's edge, the galaxies billions of light years away, all are part of a reality that unfolds within awareness itself. It's not that your mind is inside the universe, it's that the universe is inside your mind. It sounds strange, even backwards, but think about it. Everything you've ever experienced, every color, every sound, every taste, has only existed for you as information processed by your consciousness. Light waves have no color until the mind interprets them. Sound waves have no music until the mind hears them. The world as you know it is inseparable from the act of perceiving it. If this is true, then death, as we imagine it, becomes less final. When a body stops working, when the brain goes silent, is that truly the end of awareness? Or does awareness simply shift, like changing the channel on an infinite television? In biocentrism, death may not be a full stop. It might be, a pause, a change in perspective. Imagine consciousness, not as something trapped in a single body, but as something like water, able to take the shape of whatever vessel it flows into. When one cup breaks, the water doesn't cease to exist. It simply moves, takes a new form. This view aligns, in a strange way, with many spiritual traditions, from Hinduism's endless cycles of birth and rebirth, to the Buddhist concept of mind streams continuing beyond physical death. But here, It's not just mystical poetry. It's a theory that tries to anchor itself in the nature of reality itself. And biocentrism goes further. If the universe is created in the act of being observed, then there may be no single, fixed out there at all. Reality could be more like a shared dream, shaped, stabilized, and sustained by the collective perceptions of conscious beings. In this dream, time and space may not be the rigid, absolute things we think they are. They might be frameworks, coordinates, settings, generated by the mind to give form to experience. It's a little like a video game. When you move through a game's world, the scenery loads where you look, but when you turn away, the parts you can't see aren't fully there in the same way. They exist as potential, ready to appear when needed. Could the universe be similar? A vast potential, collapsing into solid form only when a conscious mind engages with it. If so, then you are not a small, insignificant speck in a cold cosmos. You are an active participant in the making of reality itself. And that brings us to the most comforting implication of all. If consciousness creates reality, then it might also create continuity. The end of the body would not erase the awareness that shaped it. Instead, like an artist setting down one canvas to begin another, consciousness could simply continue painting. Perhaps, in the moment we call death, the scenery shifts. The laws of physics bend into new patterns. Familiar forms dissolve, new ones arise. We might awaken to a different world entirely, one where the question of beginnings and endings no longer matters. If that sounds comforting, maybe it's because deep down, we've always suspected it. The fear of death is strong, but so is the quiet intuition that something in us cannot be erased. That awareness is not fragile, it is fundamental. And if awareness is fundamental, it was never born, and it can never die. Take a moment and imagine that being true. Imagine that your entire life, every moment, every heartbeat, is not just happening in the universe, but is the very reason the universe appears at all. Without you, without any conscious witness, the grand stage is dark. With you, it lights up. This changes not only how we think about death, but how we think about life. If reality unfolds through our perception, then each moment is infinitely precious. Each breath is a creative act, each glance a brushstroke on the canvas of the cosmos. The simplest acts, noticing the light on the wall, feeling the texture of a leaf, listening to rain, become sacred. Biocentrism invites us to see life, not as a journey towards some final ending, but as an endless unfolding, a dream within a dream, where every ending is just the start of another scene. And maybe, just maybe, when the curtain falls on this act, and we step into the wings of the unknown, we will find ourselves looking out at a new stage, under a new sky, with the same eternal awareness watching it all. A different perspective, but still you. So as we drift deeper into this whispered journey, let's carry this possibility with us, that life and death are not opposites, but partners in the same endless dance. And speaking of that dance, between what we call life and what we call death, there lies a strange and delicate bridge, one that science, myth, and mystery have all tried to cross. There's a moment that many describe, a moment when the noise of the world fades, when the weight of the body becomes lighter and lighter, until it feels like mist. For some, it happens on an operating table. For others, in the aftermath of an accident. And in that instant, between one heartbeat and the next, something opens. They tell of leaving their bodies, watching themselves from above, as if they were suddenly a silent witness to their own life. They describe floating, weightless, free of pain, drifting toward something that feels impossibly bright, yet not blinding. It's not just the light they speak of, it's the feeling, a feeling that words struggle to hold, a deep, almost overwhelming sense of peace, the kind of peace that makes you realize how heavy life's constant noise had been. Some see a tunnel, a long, narrowing passageway, and, at the far end, a radiance that pulls them gently, like a tide drawing water back into the sea. Some meet people, not strangers, but faces they have loved, parents, siblings, friends, long gone. Sometimes they speak, sometimes they just smile, as if they've been waiting. Others describe something even less tangible, a presence, not in human form, but something vast, loving, and infinite. A consciousness that feels older than the stars, yet intimately familiar, like a part of you that had been hidden your whole life. What's remarkable is that these stories come from everywhere, across cultures, across religions, across centuries. A soldier in a modern hospital in New York, a farmer in rural India, a child in ancient Greece. The imagery changes with the language and beliefs, but the essence is strangely the same. Of course, science has its explanations. The brain, starved of oxygen, may produce hallucinations. The sudden release of chemicals can trigger intense feelings of euphoria. The tunnel of light may be nothing more than the narrowing vision of a failing optic nerve. And yet, that doesn't explain everything. How does one explain the cases where people report accurate details of events that happened while they were clinically dead, events they could not have seen or heard, a surgeon's specific movements, a conversation in another room, objects high above that their physical eyes could never have reached? These accounts make the boundary between science and mystery blur, as if the edges of reality are more flexible than we think. Some researchers believe near-death experiences, or NDEs, might be glimpses into a deeper layer of consciousness, one that is not confined to the brain at all, a level of awareness that exists beyond space, beyond time, perhaps even beyond life as we define it. And here lies the haunting, comforting possibility that death is not a wall, but a doorway. Imagine for a moment that your awareness is a traveler. All your life, you've been living inside a room, its walls decorated with your memories, your identity, your story. When the moment of death arrives, the walls simply dissolve, and suddenly, you find yourself stepping into a vast, boundless space. The traveler is still you, but freer than you've ever been. Some people who return from these experiences say that after tasting that freedom, they no longer fear death. The fear of the unknown fades, replaced by a quiet certainty that whatever lies ahead is not darkness, but light. Others come back changed in subtler ways. They live more fully. They forgive more easily. They no longer chase things that once seemed important, because they've glimpsed something larger, something more permanent. It's as if the experience has rearranged their priorities, pulling their attention from the surface of life to its deeper currents. But NDEs also raise difficult questions. If what they saw was real, why did they have to return? Why does the door open, only to close again? Some say they were told, either by a voice or a presence, that their time was not yet over, that there were things left to do, lessons left to learn, people they still needed to meet. Others say they simply chose to come back, out of love for someone in the living world, a child, a partner, a friend, even though it meant leaving the peace behind. And maybe that's the most human part of all, that even in the face of infinite light, we are bound to each other in ways that defy logic. Of course, skeptics remain unconvinced. They point out that NDEs might just be the brain's way of cushioning the blow of death, a final act of comfort for a dying mind, that the peace and light are illusions, beautiful, but ultimately chemical. But even if that's true, what an incredible kindness of nature to grant such beauty at the edge of life. And if it's not an illusion, then perhaps these moments are the universe's way of whispering to us, you are not ending, you are only changing. Take a moment to imagine that. Imagine that when you close your eyes for the last time, you will feel weightless, that you will be met by faces you love, or a light so warm it feels like home, that you will understand, in an instant, that you were never really separate from anything at all. That and maybe, just maybe, when you return from that place, as some do, you will carry a piece of it with you, a piece of the light, a piece of that endless peace. Some say that this is the gift of a near-death experience, not to prove what lies beyond, but to remind us to live as though the beauty of that place can be found here, now. To notice the light in a stranger's smile, the peace in a quiet morning, the love in a simple touch, because perhaps the other side isn't far away at all. Perhaps it's woven into this very moment, waiting for us to notice. And speaking of other worlds we can step into without ever leaving our beds, there is a journey we all take, every single night, a journey into realms that can be strange, beautiful, and utterly surreal, dreams. Every night, without fail, we step into another world. We close our eyes, our breathing slows, and the boundaries of waking life begin to dissolve. One by one, the familiar markers of reality, the ticking clock, the soft weight of blankets, the faint hum of the room all fade away, and in that quiet space, a new story begins. Sometimes the story is beautiful, a place we've never been, yet somehow know, faces that belong to strangers and friends at the same time. moments that feel both ancient and new. Sometimes the story is strange, the laws of physics bend, logic rearranges itself, and the impossible becomes effortless. And yet, while we dream, it rarely occurs to us to question any of it. Our minds accept the shifting landscapes, the sudden changes, the surreal events, as if they were the most natural things in the world. Only when we wake do we notice the oddity. The dream slips through our fingers like water, and we're left with fragments, a face, a color, a feeling. Science tells us that dreams happen in cycles. As we sleep, we move through stages: light sleep, deep sleep, and the mysterious state known as REM, rapid eye movement. It is in REM sleep that the most vivid dreams unfold. During this stage, our brain becomes surprisingly active, almost as active as it is when we're awake. The body, however, remains still, paralyzed in a protective state, so that we don't physically act out our dreams. It's almost as if nature knows that these inner worlds require a still body, so the mind can travel without harm. But why do we dream? This is one of those questions that has fascinated humanity for as long as we've been able to wonder. The ancient Egyptians believed dreams were messages from the gods. The Greeks thought they could predict the future. Freud saw them as windows into our unconscious desires, disguised by symbols and metaphor. Jung believed they were a bridge, a way for the conscious and unconscious mind to speak to one another, a conversation in the language of images. Modern neuroscience offers another perspective. Dreams may be the brain's way of processing and organizing the flood of information we gather each day. While we sleep, our minds sift through memories, deciding which to keep and which to let fade. Emotional experiences, especially powerful ones, seem to get special attention, as if the brain is working to understand and store them in a way that makes sense. There's also evidence that dreaming is a kind of mental rehearsal. Our ancestors may have used this nightly theater to simulate threats, to prepare for dangers in a safe space. Today, we still dream of challenges, giving a speech, meeting someone new, solving a problem, and perhaps, on some level, we are practicing for life itself. And yet, there is still mystery. Why do some dreams feel more real than waking life? Why do they evoke emotions so intense they linger for hours, even days, after we wake? How is it that a place we have never been, built from fragments of memory, can feel more like home than our own bedroom? Some scientists suggest that dreams are, in a way, simulations within the simulation. Our waking life could be the outer world, governed by certain rules. Dreams might be a deeper layer, where those rules are loosened, and we can explore possibilities without consequence. If that's true, it means every night we are stepping into an experimental version of reality, one generated entirely by our own minds. And there's something almost poetic in that idea, because it means that, every night, we become both the creator and the explorer of our own private universe. Sometimes dreams serve as mirrors. They show us our fears, our desires, our unresolved conflicts, but dressed in symbols. We might dream of losing our teeth, which psychologists link to feelings of powerlessness. We might dream of flying, which can feel like liberation. We might dream of someone we haven't spoken to in years, reminding us of connections we thought we had forgotten. Other times, dreams take us to places we can't explain. We meet people we've never seen, speak languages we don't know, walk through landscapes that feel alien and yet intimately familiar. And then there are lucid dreams, where we become aware, within the dream, that we are dreaming. In those moments, the dreamer gains a kind of power, the ability to shape the dream, to fly at will, to create entire worlds with a thought. Lucid dreaming has been studied for decades, and some believe it can be used for problem-solving, creativity, even healing. Imagine confronting a fear in a space where nothing can truly harm you, and emerging in waking life with that fear diminished. But not all dreams are gentle. Nightmares remind us that the mind's theater can also be a stage for shadowed stories. They can jolt us awake, heart racing, with images we would rather not see. Yet even nightmares may serve a purpose, to help us process fear, to prepare us for challenges, to push us toward understanding something we've been avoiding. And here is a thought to hold for a moment. What if our waking life is, in some ways, just another layer of the dream? Philosophers like Descartes questioned whether we could ever truly know we are awake. If dreams can feel so real, what proof do we have that reality isn't simply a longer, more stable dream? Even in modern thought, some have connected this Idea 2. The simulation hypothesis, suggesting that our everyday experience might be a vast, shared dream, generated not by a sleeping brain, but by something larger. When you think of it this way, the border between dream and reality begins to blur. Both are experiences created in the mind. Both are filled with sensations, emotions, and stories. The only difference is the consistency of the rules. Perhaps dreams are not escapes from reality at all, but reminders of its flexibility, that the world we take for granted can be just as strange, just as malleable, if only we learn to see it differently. And maybe that's why certain dreams stay with us forever, not because they were just dreams, but because they whispered something true, something we sensed in our bones but could not explain. There's a quiet magic in the idea that every single night, without fail, our minds create a theater of possibility, a space where time is fluid, where the dead can speak, where fears can be faced, and where joy can take forms unknown to waking life. And when morning comes, we carry traces of those journeys with us. They might be faint, a lingering emotion, an image, a line of dialogue we can't quite place, but they remind us that our inner worlds are vast, uncharted territories. So tonight, when you close your eyes and begin that slow drift into sleep, notice the moment you cross the threshold. Notice how the edges of the day begin to dissolve, how thoughts become shapes, shapes become places, and places become stories. Because in that moment, you are stepping into a world entirely your own. And, speaking of worlds that bend and shift, some philosophers believe that what we call reality might itself be a dream, not one we wake from each morning, but one that is woven into the very fabric of existence. There is an old story from ancient China. It begins quietly, like a dream itself. Zhuangzi, better known to history as Zhuangzi, was a philosopher, a poet, a man who often wandered through the natural world, watching rivers, listening to the wind through bamboo, letting his thoughts drift far beyond the ordinary concerns of life. One night, he fell asleep. In his dream, he was no longer a man. He was a butterfly, not pretending to be a butterfly, not imagining it. He was a butterfly. He could feel the lightness in his body, the delicate tremor of his wings as they caught the warm air. He floated from flower to flower, tasting nectar, feeling the sun spread over his wings like a blessing. In this dream, there was no philosophy, no questions, no heavy burden of human thought, only the joy of flying, the simple existence of being a butterfly. And then, he woke. The walls of his room surrounded him again. His human body returned. His mind, the same mind that had read books, taught students, pondered the mysteries of life, stirred once more. But as he sat there, the memory of the dream still vivid in his mind, a question arose. How did he know which was real? Was he Zhuangzi who had dreamed he was a butterfly? Or was he a butterfly now dreaming he was Zhuangzi? And if he could not be certain, what did that say about the nature of reality itself? This is the heart of Zhuangzi's butterfly dream, a short, simple tale that has echoed for over 2,000 years, whispered across generations, studied by philosophers, poets, and mystics alike. On the surface, it is a paradox about identity. In the dream, the butterfly's experience was as vivid, as complete, as real, as waking life. The butterfly had no awareness of Zhuangzi, just as Zhuangzi in waking life had no awareness of the butterfly's dreams. The boundaries between the two selves blurred, and perhaps vanished altogether. If both states felt real at the time, how could one be sure that waking life is not also a dream? Zhuangzi's question invites us into a deeper contemplation, that what we call self may not be fixed at all. It may be fluid, changing with each state of consciousness. When you dream, you inhabit a self made of different rules, different memories, a different body, and yet, in the dream, you accept it without question. What if this waking self is just another mask? What if, somewhere beyond, there are countless other selves you could awaken into? Modern philosophers sometimes compare the butterfly dream to thought experiments about virtual reality and simulations. If you were placed in a simulation so perfect that it felt indistinguishable from reality, could you ever be sure you weren't inside one? In dreams, we already live in such perfect simulations, worlds generated entirely within our own minds, yet convincing enough to fool us completely. The butterfly dream also echoes the ideas in Indian philosophy, where life itself is sometimes described as Maya, an illusion, a veil drawn over the ultimate truth. The difference is that in Zhuangzi's telling, there's no anxiety about it. The question is not meant to unsettle, but to open a space of wonder. If life is a dream, then it is a dream we are meant to participate in fully. Think about it, right now, as you hear these words, you feel your body, your breath, the space you occupy. You accept these sensations as real. But in a dream, you also accept sensations without question. You feel the wind, you taste the food, you walk on impossible landscapes, and never stop to doubt them. The only real difference between the two states is whether you wake up from them. So, Zhuangzi's riddle becomes a quiet reminder that certainty about reality might be impossible, and that perhaps that's not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. In the soft logic of dreams, being a butterfly is no less you than being a human. The experience is what matters. The consciousness is what matters. The identity is like a coat you put on for the weather of the moment, knowing you may change it again when the season shifts. And here's something fascinating. Neuroscientists have studied the brain during vivid dreaming and found that many of the same regions are active as in waking life. The mind does not. Label one as false and the other as true in the moment. Both states are lived with the same immersive depth, so perhaps the question is not which is real, but what makes us call something real in the first place. Is it the consistency of the world, the persistence of its rules, the way we carry its memories forward, or is real simply the state we happen to be in right now? Zhuangzi's story has inspired countless interpretations. Some see it as a metaphor for the ever-changing nature of self. Others view it as an early exploration of consciousness and perception. Still others treat it as a spiritual teaching, an invitation to let go of the rigid boundaries we draw between I and not I. Because if you can be both Zhuangzi and the butterfly, then perhaps you are also the river and the stone, the sky and the star, the dream and the dreamer. This is where the story quietly expands into something larger, a vision of identity that is not a single point, but a vast, interconnected web of being. You might spend your waking hours believing you are a fixed self, moving through a stable world, but the dream reminds you, both can change in an instant. And maybe, just maybe, they are changing all the time, in ways you can't perceive. And isn't that thought freeing? If self and reality are both fluid, then nothing is ever completely fixed. You are not trapped in a single version of yourself. You are not bound by one reality forever. You can wake and wake again into new possibilities. Perhaps that is why Zhuangzi's butterfly dream still feels alive after so many centuries. It carries not just a question, but a gentle permission. Permission to not take your identity or your reality too seriously. Permission to see them as temporary arrangements, like a dream you are living right now. When the dream ends, you will wake. But who will you be then? And here, in the space between one reality and the next, between the human and the butterfly, between certainty and wonder, lies the heart of the mystery. It's a place where questions float like wings in the air, where answers are less important in the experience of flight, where the wind of possibility lifts you, even for a moment, into a state beyond labels. Maybe that is what Zhuangzi felt as he drifted in his dream. Not confusion, but freedom. Not doubt, but the joy of being untethered from a single version of the self. When you close your eyes tonight and step into your own dream, you might remember his question. And in that moment, you may not try to answer it. You may simply feel the flutter of wings and let yourself drift. And speaking of drifting into vast identities, some philosophies suggest that our sense of I can stretch across the entire cosmos itself. There's a moment that only a few hundred human beings in all of history have ever experienced. It happens when you are far above the earth, so far that the ground is no longer beneath your feet, but beneath your entire sense of being. Look out of the spacecraft window, and there it is. Not a continent, not a country, not your hometown, but the whole earth, a pale blue sphere suspended in the deep, endless black of space. Astronauts say it's difficult to prepare for. You expect beauty, yes, but what arrives is something different, something deeper, a quiet shock in the heart, a sudden shift in the way you see everything. It's called the overview effect. From that vantage point, there are no visible borders. The lines that divide nations in maps are nowhere to be found. The wars, the rivalries, the arguments, none of them appear in that view. What you see instead is a delicate skin of clouds swirling over vast oceans, deserts, forests, and ice caps. You see how thin the atmosphere is, a fragile film holding in the air that every breath of life depends upon. You see the curve of the planet, a soft, luminous arc against the darkness. Some astronauts describe a sudden awareness that everything you've ever known, every person you've ever met, every story in human history, has happened on that small sphere. And when you see it whole, your mind does something strange. It stops placing yourself in the center of the world, and instead places the world in the center of you. Michael Collins, who orbited the moon during Apollo 11, once said that he felt as if the Earth was too beautiful to be an accident. Edgar Mitchell, another Apollo astronaut, described it as an instant global consciousness, a deep feeling that we are all part of one fragile living system. But perhaps the most striking part of the overview, the effect is not the grandeur, it's the fragility. From space, the Earth looks vulnerable, as if it could be cupped gently in your hands. There is nothing protecting it from the black void except a thin shimmer of atmosphere. The sight can be overwhelming. Some astronauts have cried, others have gone silent, unable to speak, and when they return, they carry that vision with them. Conflicts seem smaller, petty divisions seem absurd. The urgent becomes trivial, and the trivial becomes urgent, like the need to care for the only home we have. It is as if the overview effect is not just a view, but a kind of awakening, a reminder that all of us are passengers on the same small ship, drifting together through an endless cosmic sea. You don't have to be an astronaut to imagine it. Close your eyes and picture yourself above the Earth. Watch the clouds move in, slow spirals. See the lights of cities blinking softly against the night side. Watch the sunrise creep over the horizon, painting the ocean's gold. From up here, your problems, the deadlines, the disagreements, the long list of things you think you must do, fade into the background. The noise of life grows quiet. What remains is a simple truth. We are together in this, whether we recognize it or not. Philosophers might call this a shift from the ego self to the planetary self. You stop thinking of yourself as an individual separate from the world, and start feeling yourself as part of the living Earth, as inseparable from it as your lungs are from the air they breathe. And in that realization, something opens. Compassion, perhaps, or maybe it's responsibility, or maybe it's the same feeling Zhuangzi might have had when he woke from his butterfly dream, a recognition that the boundaries we draw are far less real than we think. The overview effect has even been studied by psychologists. Many astronauts return with a lasting sense of awe, which research shows can increase empathy, cooperation, and environmental awareness. In a way, it's like a permanent mental realignment. Once you've seen the whole, you can't unsee it. And yet, there's another, quieter implication. The fragility you feel when you look at Earth from space is not just about the planet. It's about you. You realize that your own life, too, is delicate, temporary, precious. The view from above doesn't diminish the value of your existence, it magnifies it. Because if the Earth is one of a kind in this vast emptiness, so is the life you're living right now. From that perspective, every moment matters more. Every kindness, every connection, every breath of fresh air becomes part of something worth protecting. It's strange from so far away. Earth is silent. You can't hear the storms or the laughter or the music or the cries. And yet, the silence tells you something, that all the noise is happening together. At once, in this small oasis of light, you could think of the overview effect as the cosmic version of waking from a dream. You see the world as it really is, not as a map of territories and histories, but as a shared home without walls. And maybe, you start to live differently because of it. So tonight, as you listen and drift, you might imagine yourself rising, higher and higher, until you pass the clouds and cross into the black expanse. You look down, and the Earth turns slowly beneath you, a blue and white jewel floating in a dark velvet sea dot. And in that stillness, you understand. You belong to it, and it belongs to you. There is no separation, only the breath of life moving through all things at once. And with that awareness, we return to where we began, your own quiet universe. You have been far tonight, further than footsteps could take you, further than the reach of rockets or telescopes. We began under a sky of stars, and then we left it behind. We wandered through questions older than language. We walked the thin bridges between science and wonder, between what we know and what we feel. We lingered in paradoxes that don't just sit in books, they live inside us. You have seen the universe as a dream, a program, a stage set for infinite acts. You have stood at the edge of time itself, watching it slow, bend, loop. You have felt the weight of eternity pressing against the smallness of a single moment, and discovered that somehow, that moment holds just as much as eternity ever could. We drifted through the silence between the stars. We wondered why that silence exists, and whether it hides life or emptiness. We stared ahead to the far, cold future, the heat death of all things, and then bent back to the present, to the now, to the ticking heart of time as it passes. Through us, we thought about what it means to live a life not once, but again and again. We dove into the quantum haze, where particles blur and possibilities hide, and we asked ourselves what role we play in making reality real. We touched the surface of consciousness, not the mechanics, but the mystery, and for a moment, we allowed it to be beyond explanation. We let life flip upside down with the idea of biocentrism, that maybe it isn't the universe that creates life, but life that creates the universe. We listened to the voices of those who have stood at the edge of death, and returned, carrying visions that dissolve the line between here and beyond. We stepped into dreams, the nightly plays written and acted by our own minds, and wondered whether they are reflections of reality or reality itself. We remembered Zhuangzi's butterfly, and the delicate uncertainty of identity. We saw the earth as the astronauts see it, whole, small, and glowing in a sea of black. We felt the overview effect in our bones, the dissolving of borders, and the quiet, unshakable truth that we all share the same fragile home. And now, after all of that, we return, because every journey outward is also a journey inward. The stars, the paradoxes, the questions, they were never separate from you. They are part of the same thing, the awareness, looking, wondering, feeling. When you explore the cosmos, you are exploring your own mind. When you wonder about the beginning of everything, you are wondering about the beginning of yourself. When you imagine the end of time, you are brushing your fingers against the edges of your own impermanence. The self, it is not something you carry like an object. It is the space in which all things appear. Thoughts, feelings, memories, sensations, they rise and fall like planets coming into view and drifting away again. And yet, behind all of them, there is something still, something that does not change. That stillness is what you are returning to now. It has been here all along, even as your mind leaped across galaxies and back. It is here in the rhythm of your breath, in the slow weight of your body sinking into rest, in the soft pull of gravity reminding you that you belong to this moment. The infinite conversation between the mind and the cosmos is not something you must finish tonight. In truth, it never finishes. It flows on, even as you sleep. Every question you've touched tonight will keep unfolding in the quiet. Just as stars keep burning beyond the horizon you can see, you don't need to hold onto any of it now. The facts, the images, the strange and beautiful ideas, you can let them drift. They will not vanish. They will simply find their place, like constellations aligning in your own inner sky. Here, there is no urgency, no need to solve, no need to reach the end of the sentence. The words can become softer, slower, until they are just shapes in the distance. Your breathing is slow now, your thoughts softer. The night is wide, and you are lying at its center, not separate from it, but part of it. The same quiet that fills the space between galaxies is filling you. This is what it means to return to the self, not to the small story of who you are, but to the vast presence in which all stories arise. The self that is both the question and the answer, both the traveler and the journey. And so, the paradox completes itself. You left yourself to discover yourself. You traveled to the edges of thought only to find you were home the whole time. Now, the road ends where it began, in silence. You can rest here. You can let go. You can allow the words to fade until they are only breath, until even the breath fades into the background hum of existence itself. Nothing more is needed. You are already part of the vast story. You always were. Now, let go of the words, and drift into the quiet, where all questions rest.